Lucas tripped on the warped step, tray tipping before his mind caught up. The glass left his hand, red wine arcing through candlelight. It struck the orc's chest, spreading across lacquered scale armor, already dark with old stains. Every warrior in the tavern froze. Steel scraped leather as hands went to hilts.
She's going to kill me. Right here, in front of everyone.
The orc rose, slow as a drawn sword. She didn't blink. Lucas, you stupid boy. You've just spilled wine on the one law nobody breaks. Wine dripped down the golden trim, pooling at her belt. Martha watched, helpless, knowing no one in the Iron Antler would stop what came next. The orc stood to her full height, and the entire room shrank around her silence. Verka took a step forward. The crowd parted like wheat before a scythe. No one wanted to be in her path.
He tried to move, but his legs had locked solid.
She stopped before the boy, close enough that he could smell leather and steel and the faint bitterness of wine. Then, impossibly, the orc lowered herself to one knee.
You are mine now.
His mind went blank. The words didn't fit any reality he knew.
Martha's knuckles went white on the bar. She'd heard the old stories. Nobody crossed the red vow. No one in the tavern spoke. No one even breathed. The only sound was the drip of wine from the boy's empty tray.
He waited for the blow, for the axe. It didn't come.
And all the while, Verka's yellow eyes held him, unblinking, waiting.
Get your things. You are leaving with me.
He heard the words, but they landed like a death sentence.
Do as she says, boy. If you run, she'll find you. Lucas climbed the narrow stairs to his attic room, his body moving while his mind stayed frozen. With trembling hands, he stuffed a sack with his spare shirt, a comb, and his mother's sewing kit, the only things he owned. When he descended, the orc stood exactly where he'd left her. The crowd parted in silence, their eyes full of something between pity and relief.
Follow.
She pushed the heavy oak door open and strode into the silver moonlight. Lucas trailed behind, his heart hammering so hard he couldn't hear his own steps. High above, the Iron Antler sign rocked on its iron bracket, a slow, grinding groan that seemed to mark his departure. Inside, Martha sank onto a bench, the empty tavern swallowing her as she stared at the door. She'd lost boys to conscription, to sickness, but never to a claim like this. By the time pale light touched the horizon, Lucas's feet were raw, and his throat felt glued shut.
He didn't know where they were going. He didn't know anything.
Verka hadn't looked back once. Her braid swung like a pendulum with each stride. The wine-stained shoulder a dark blot against the dawn. They stopped when the sun dipped below the tree line. Verka sat on a fallen log and began running a whetstone down her blade.
Sleep. We move at dawn.
He didn't dare ask why. Not yet.
She pulled a worn parchment from her belt and studied it in the firelight, her tusked face revealing nothing.
Even in the dim light, he could see the stain. His stain spread across her chest like spilled blood.
He wrapped himself in his sack and curled into a ball. The ground was hard, the air cold, but exhaustion pulled him under.
She's waiting for something. But what? And will I live to see it?
Without a word, Verka stood and tossed a heavy woolen blanket at his feet. It landed with a soft thump on the leaf litter.
A blanket? Was this some kind of trap?
She didn't tie him, didn't post guard. She simply lay down on the opposite side of the fire and closed her eyes.
Maybe she doesn't think I am worth the trouble of running. Or maybe she knows I won't get far.
He watched the stars push through the canopy, his mind replaying Martha's worried face as he'd walked out the door.
Martha, I am sorry. I didn't mean for any of this.
Exhaustion finally claimed him. The blanket was coarse but warm, and for a few hours, the cold and the fear retreated. In his dreams, the wine spilled again, an endless red cascade that never hit the floor, always frozen in the instant of impact. He woke briefly to the sound of Verka adding a log to the fire. The flames flared, and he saw her profile, still and unreadable.
Why haven't you hurt me yet?
The next morning, Lucas volunteered to carry Verka's pack. She handed it to him without a word. The weight nearly buckled his knees, but he staggered after her, determined not to complain.
How much longer? Or is this just a slow march to nowhere?
Verka grunted. The sound held no answer, only the end of conversation. When they finally stopped, Lucas scrambled to gather kindling. Half the sticks scattered before he reached the fire pit.
She didn't even look up. I am invisible to her.
He insisted on carrying the water skins too, even when his shoulders screamed in protest. His hands blistered from hauling and scrubbing, but he hid the raw skin so she wouldn't see.
Maybe that's all I am to her. A pack mule. Replaceable. Disposable.
The days blurred. He stopped trying to speak, stopped expecting anything but the next mile. The next inn squatted at a crossroads, its sign creaking in the night wind like a warning. Verka gestured for him to wait outside while she spoke with a trader. But Lucas's ear caught voices through the shutter. Inside, rough voices swapped war stories. Mercenaries, by the sound of it, and they'd seen the orc captain pass through. The red vow, one said, as if the words themselves could cut. She never forgets a stain. A low laugh answered. Better dead than stained red.
Red vow, stained red. They were talking about her, and that meant they were talking about me.
When he slipped back inside, Verka had already claimed a corner table. She glanced up briefly, then returned to her tankard.
She's been waiting to kill me. The spill wasn't an accident. It was the trigger.
A bowl of stew sat untouched in front of him, the steam thinning into the candlelit air. Verka said nothing, but her yellow eyes watched him from across the table, unblinking. That night, deep in the woods, Verka slept against a fallen trunk. Lucas lay still, counting her slow breaths. When her breathing deepened, he slid from his blanket and crept into the dark, heart already racing. He ran, branches, whipping his face, driven by the certainty that dawn would bring his death. Then a shadow detached from the trees ahead. Verka stood in his path, arms crossed, not even winded.
You are mine by law, not by chains.
He froze, bracing for a fist or blade, but the blow never came.
She turned and walked back toward camp, expecting him to follow. He did, feet heavy.
No beating, no threats, just silence that felt heavier than any punishment.
He lay awake the rest of the night, watching stars wheel overhead, waiting for something that never happened.
She didn't even tie me down. What kind of cage has no bars?
They crested the ridge at dusk, and Lucas saw the camp, a sprawl of tents and banners, cook fires glinting in the valley. Warriors saluted as Verka passed, their fists to chests. Captain. The word followed her like a title etched in stone. She stopped at the center of the camp, turning just enough to place a heavy hand on Lucas's shoulder.
This is my squire.
The muttering started low, then spread like a grass fire. The word squire passed from lip to lip, laced with disbelief. A scarred orc voice challenged the decision, the tone rough with disbelief.
The red vow chose him. I do not question it, neither will you.
Squire, the word meant honor. It couldn't possibly apply to him.
Verka walked toward her command tent, the crowd parting as she went. Lucas stood frozen, 100 stares pressing in.
He followed because he had no choice. Squire or slave, the cage was just larger.
Inside her tent, Verka knelt to his level again, lantern light softening the lines of her face.
This stain, your wine, it triggered an oath older than this camp. The red vow claims anyone who sheds red on my plate. They are bound as sworn squire, not slave. It is a bond of protection and training. You were meant to be my shield one day, as I will be your teacher now.
She let the silence stretch, her yellow eyes steady on his.
But I will not force this. If you wish to leave, you may walk out now. No harm will come.
Lucas looked at the wine stain, the shape that had haunted his dreams.
It wasn't a death mark. It was a door. All the silence, the miles, the cold nights. She'd been waiting for me to see.
The choice was still his. The cage had been a cage only in his own mind.
Why me? I am just a clumsy tavern boy who can't even carry a tray straight without causing disaster.
The vow does not ask permission. It only asks what you will become. And you have already begun to answer.
He remembered Martha's tight-lipped worry, his tiny attic room, the gray weight of a life never chosen. His voice came out like a thread of smoke, thin, but there.
I'll stay. I want to learn.
Then you are my squire in truth. Take this.
She placed a wooden practice sword into his hands, its weight unfamiliar and promising. The wood was rough from use, worn smooth in the grip by other hands before his.
He wasn't a warrior, not yet. But something new had kindled in his chest, fragile but hot.
And under the cold, watchful eyes of the camp, Lucas's training began, one swing at a time. Verka drilled basic stances, her voice a sharp blade cutting through the morning chill.
Feet wider, grip firm. The sword is not a broomstick.
Lucas's foot slid on the wet grass. He hit the ground shoulder first. The breath knocked out of him.
Get up.
He did. Then fell again. Stood. Fell. Over and over until his palms bled and his teeth clattered.
He was drowning in his own weakness, but he couldn't stop. Not now.
Later, under a sudden slant of sunlight, Verka lunged, and Lucas's blade found hers. Not perfectly, but solid, their wooden swords locked for a heartbeat. Verka's eyes narrowed, then flickered with something almost like interest. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, the smallest sign of a door unlocking.
He was bruised and bleeding, but he was still standing. And for the first time in his life, that felt like enough.
Weeks blurred to months. Lucas ran the camp perimeter at dawn until his legs burned. He lifted stones, split logs, and drilled stances until the forms lived in his bones.
He was no longer the soft thing that had knelt in the tavern. Something was hardening.
The mercenaries noticed too, but only as a joke. They called him Stain Squire, behind his back. He heard their laughter once and felt his face burn, but he didn't turn.
Let them laugh. Every insult made the sword feel lighter.
In the evenings, he sought the whetstone, learning to hone a blade until its edge sang. Verka observed from a distance, never interfering. The culling was his alone.
If I can't endure this, I don't deserve to stand beside her.
He remained an outcast, but the sword in his grip no longer felt borrowed. It felt earned. 2 years of endless drills and guard duty had sharpened Lucas into a lean young sword. At 16, his patrol stride was silent, his eyes restless in the dark. A flicker of movement in the tree line caught his gaze, too smooth for wind, too deliberate for an animal. In the branches, a dark shape crouched, motionless, half visible against the canopy stars.
Just one slip from her guards, and the red vow will be drowned in red.
Lucas found Verka near the watchfire, napping the edge of her greatsword, sparks biting the dusk.
Verka, I saw someone in the tree line. A watcher.
Enemies always lurk beyond the firelight. Do not be so jumpy, boy.
Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but she raised a hand, the gesture final.
She thinks it's nothing, but my gut hasn't been wrong before.
He returned to his patrol, but every shadow now held a blade, and the night had suddenly grown teeth. On the third night, Lucas's sleepless eyes were hollow. He stood outside Verka's tent long after the camp quieted, his sword a cold comfort, the tent flap pulled back. Verka's form filled the opening, her yellow eyes hard.
You are not my bodyguard yet. Sleep is a soldier's discipline.
I saw someone, Verka. Not a scout, a predator. He was waiting.
Your paranoia will ruin you, boy. Rest. That's an order.
She let the canvas fall, sealing herself away. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument.
He couldn't force her to see, but he couldn't abandon his post either. Not while that face smiled in his memory.
So Lucas remained a shadow at her door, dozing upright when exhaustion finally clawed him under. And in the deep shadows, the assassin watched the boy's vigil, with venom in his eyes, waiting for the moment to strike. Lucas didn't falter. He honed his blade until the edge whispered, and he waited. Deep in the bone-cold hours, the assassin uncoiled from the shadows like smoke from a snuffed candle. A blade whispered against the tent rope. The canvas shivered, barely a sound, just enough. Lucas was rounding the eastern watchpost when the tiny wrongness hit his ear, metal on taut fiber. His head snapped around.
That's not the wind. That's murder.
A hunched form crouched at Verka's tent, its hand already inside the slit canvas. Not a shadow, not a stray animal.
The red vow was never about the wine. It was always about this moment.
His legs bolted before his mind could order them. The scabbard slapped his thigh as he tore free the blade.
Verka, get up.
The assassin's blade swept aside the canvas, his form already lunging into the dark interior. The distance shrank in 3 pounding heartbeats. But the knife was already inside. Lucas didn't slow. He drove his shoulder into the assassin's ribs just as the dagger plunged. The impact sent both sprawling across the dirt. The blade sliced air instead of flesh. The camp erupted. Torches flared, voices shouting, steel rasping from scabbards. Lucas scrambled upright, sword snapping into guard. The assassin rose opposite, a curved blade in each hand now.
The boy wants to die, too. How noble and how stupid.
Not tonight. Not ever.
The assassin lunged and Lucas met him blade for blade, the clash ringing across the camp, a slash aimed at his throat. Lucas tilted and let it skim his shoulder. The sting sharp but distant.
2 years of drills, of falls, of standing back up, all for this one dance.
They circled, firelight catching the gleam of death in the assassin's eyes. The assassin fainted low and drove a dagger toward Lucas's ribs. Lucas twisted, but the edge bit deep into his forearm. Blood splashed the dirt.
Pain was a lesson Verka had taught him to ignore. Her voice echoed, "A wrist locked in pain is a wrist you can break."
He dropped his weight, hooking the assassin's knife hand with the guard of his sword. A sharp twist, exactly the way Verka had drilled 100 times. The dagger spun free, glittering in the firelight. Lucas drove his boot into the assassin's chest, and the man crashed backward, breathless. Before the assassin could rise, the point of Lucas's sword rested against his throat.
Not a tavern boy anymore.
The assassin lay still, his hood fallen back, old scars pale in the moonlight. For a long moment, the only sounds were Lucas's ragged breathing and the hiss of torches. He had stopped a blade meant for Verka. The wine-stained oath was no longer an accident. It was a debt now paid. The tent canvas flew back. Verka surged into the torchlight, great sword in hand. Her eyes found Lucas immediately. Bleeding, panting, sword still wet, her gaze dropped to the wine stain on her armor, the old faded mark.
The vow had not been empty. The stain had chosen well.
Lucas saw the change in her. The tension left her shoulders, replaced by something still and deep.
He felt no fear now, only a quiet pride that burned brighter than the torch in his hand.
Silence stretched, heavy with 2 years and an oath fulfilled. Verka nodded once, a slow, deliberate dip of her chin. Lucas returned the nod. No words. The red vow was complete. In that firelit circle, the bond between orc and human was no longer a claim. It was a covenant. Verka strode to the center of the torchlit circle. The entire camp had gathered, silent and watchful.
Hear me. The red vow is not superstition. It is a covenant of blood and loyalty.
She pressed a hand to her chest, over the faded stain.
This boy spilled wine on my armor 2 years ago. That clumsiness was fate.
Then, She did something no one expected. She knelt.
You are no longer my squire. From this night, you are my sword brother.
She held out her greatsword, hilt first, toward Lucas.
The boy who tripped with a wine tray now stood beside a legend.
The silence cracked with a roar. Cheers, disbelieving shouts, swords hammered on shields. The assassin lay bound and forgotten as the camp celebrated the fulfillment of an ancient oath. 2 guards hauled the assassin into the dark, the bound figure dragging his heels as the cheers swallowed his curses. A heavy hand slammed Lucas's shoulder, shoving a clay mug into his grip. A scarred orc veteran leaned close. Welcome, sword brother. You've earned your seat at the fire. Lucas grinned through the sting of fresh bandages. The stares held no scorn now, only wonder.
He wasn't the stained squire anymore.
Later, he caught his reflection in the flat of his sword, a lean face with a fresh scar, and eyes no longer afraid.
The boy who tripped with a tray was gone. In his place stood a warrior.
Around the fire, a rough song rose, and the camp settled into a quiet warmth it had not known for weeks. And for the first time in his life, Lucas felt the weight of his past finally lift. The fire had sunk to embers, the camp's noise a distant murmur. Verka and Lucas sat alone at the edge of the fading glow. Verka lifted her hand, slipping a small iron ring from her finger, a simple band blackened by time.
Keep this.
The cool metal pressed into his palm, heavier than it had any right to be.
What does it mean?
That you are mine, and I am yours, always.
The words settled over him like a mantle, not a claim, but a promise. They sat in silence, watching the last sparks climb into a sky just starting to pale. Then, as the first gold touched the tree line, they rose together, and together they walked into the sunrise, side by side, bound by a vow no blade could sever.